fully grasp and revealed to those who don't fully know it. However, if you choose the second option, there is something opening up. Namely, if you accept that fiction is not entirely incompatible with truth, then we begin to see something quite unexpected and different. We begin to see that, in fact, many sketches of Gandhi, pen portraits, descriptions of his day, his life, his lifestyle, many of those descriptions are like as if they were taken from a novel. The first time I was struck by that thought when I was reading Nehru's autobiography, in which he has a paragraph on what Gandhi looked like when he started his salt march, his march to Dandi, which made Gandhi a worldwide name. Nehru describes him in terms that you would associate with a novelist, with his long stick in hand, taking the first step towards a destination that even within the Congress party at that time, not everybody was very happy with. In fact, Sarojini Naidu had said that this would be just a joke to make a little salt at the sea coast. This will not do anything for the British Empire, let alone shake it. Nehru describes Gandhi taking those first few steps in such an overwhelming way. You feel you are watching a movie or you are reading a novel, and you never forget that feeling that comes from that description. Nehru standing by, taking those steps with Gandhi as the crowd gathered from a few to a few dozens, then from a few dozens to a few hundreds, and by the time they reached Dandi, it was a few thousands, ready to face violence, with peace in their minds and complete lack of fear. It's a classic portrait if you see it there. But also if you see it in Louis Fisher, his biography still sells at airports. The life of Mahatma Gandhi, even his portrait of Gandhi on that march is something that stays with you, as if you have seen a famous Hollywood actor in action, or you've read it, how a great novelist has described the protagonist's most important step. But then there are many other episodes of Gandhi's life which feel like fiction when you read them in various sources. Louis Fisher himself, in fact, describing it, how Gandhi taught him how to eat a mango in Sevagram, so that the juice would spill and your lips would still look presentable after you have had a mango without cutting it. It's a description that is so amusing and so picturesque that again, you don't see that this is something from a politician, a great leader, etc. It's a different feel to it. Or Vincent Sheehan, how he describes Gandhi the day before his assassination. Sheehan was the last journalist to interview him before his death. And in fact, he had a second appointment on the next day. Vincent Sheehan's description and his the words in which he stored the memory of that interview and then wrote it out is a remarkable piece of work in terms of how it captures the Gandhi about to die for a cause that we don't fully still grasp. What did he die for? Was it India, its freedom? Was it for us, all of us, our world? How should we feel about him? Vincent Sheehan, his description, his portrait of Gandhi's, how he sat, his posture, his words, all of that is so fiction-like that it's not possible to capture it academic analysis of Gandhi. And then next day when he got there and Gandhi was no more, Vincent Sheehan's own description of the crowd that assembled there and began to grow that evening is also out of the domain of academic or rational description of any kind. And these are just a few episodes. Gandhi is a very appropriate figure for considering as if his life itself was fiction. And when you visit the Gandhi Smriti, where Gandhi was assassinated, you absorb Einstein's famous words, which have been engraved on a large stone there. I've taken generations of students there to visit this place, and many of them just stand there reading Einstein's words and wondering what was so strange about Gandhi that Einstein should say that future generations will refuse to believe that such a man walked on this earth. Yes, it's fiction of a kind that we don't quite acknowledge as perhaps the best route to truth. So used we are to seeing fiction merely as stories interestingly told. Yes, we regard the story as a genre fit for conveying truth about life to children. That's all they can take. And yes, stories do convey a number of truths to children, perhaps. But the idea that truth and fiction are not incompatible, in fact are very closely knit together, struck me as a very interesting idea. And as I started to revisit Gandhi and my text on him, I discovered that Gandhi himself was probably a fiction writer. And the name of his work, which can read like fiction if you begin to look at it like that, is In Swaraj. In Swaraj is a strange book to read. And those of you who have read this thin political pamphlet, the only authentic statement of Gandhi's doctrine in politics, then you would perhaps remember how it struck you the first time you read it before you were told that this is a very serious document, don't make fun of it. It's now, of course, part of Cambridge Modern Political Thinker series with a long introduction by Anthony Verrill, who prepares you to see in Swaraj for something other than how you feel about it. But how you feel about it is perhaps the first honest reaction. That you are looking at a bulldozer. Bulldozers are a pretty common vehicle these days in many parts of the world. But Gandhi's bulldozer consists of words. He starts by bitterly criticizing so many aspects of life that we take for granted and signs of progress. Doctors, for example, that we take as symbols and as sources of our life and safety. He's merciless about his criticism of doctors. Lawyers are next. And then he has institutions. The railways, for example. I think the only companion Gandhi could have found if he were in his time, a man born, a man who died a year before Gandhi was born, Charles Dickens, his description in Dombey and Sons of how the railway engine comes. And it's that way that Dickens gets rid of his villain in Dombey and Sons. As if a terribly evil giant has come by. The sounds of London's tubes still remind you of Dickens' great discomfort with all the digging that was going on towards the last years of his life. Gandhi's dismissal of railways is of that level and proportion. And you go through those sections thinking, oh, what? Well, yes, just because it's Gandhi's writing, I have to go through this. Otherwise, it's ridiculous. how can somebody write like this? Is there nothing that's good about all this? I'm a train lover since my childhood, and I still feel very uncomfortable with that section. And then you have sweeping statements about civilization. Not just Western civilization, but modern civilization, he explains. As you go on with Hind Swaraj, you realize that the man is either mad or he's offering us something of a one man's manifesto against the world as he sees it. It's a book that you cannot take seriously unless you have been told by a tutor that you will be examined on it. Nehru almost dismissed it, saying this is not the way to think about India's future, he told Bapu. Not only Nehru, in fact, Gandhi's own self-appointed guru, political guru, Gokhale, when he read the book, he said to Gandhi, well, spend a few years in India and you will get over all this. You will forget about all this. Well, the fact is that Gandhi never forgot about it. He translated the original Gujarati into English himself and stood by every word of it, including his critique of how the parliamentary system of democracy works. Some of the metaphors he uses there are politically so inappropriate that they can't even be quoted to you. The circumstances in which Hind Swaraj was written are also of the stuff of which fiction is made. This dismissal of the world as it exists, as it has developed into the world we live in, this dismissal is a sweeping commentary on millennia, several centuries, across spaces across the world. It's sweeping in the broadest sense of the word sweep. It doesn't stop at any rational boundaries to say something that you might say this man wants to convey. Gandhi wrote Hind Swaraj when he was 40. He was still 6 years away from the most daunting challenge of his life, India's freedom. He was still an activist in South Africa, and the word activist is a modern coinage. It was not known at that time. At that time, you could not be an activist without a following. Today it's possible. Gandhi had been told by many that India was where he would have to now lead politics. Something which he wasn't very comfortable with as an idea, but he was on a steamer, on a ship, for 9 days during which he wrote Hind Swaraj. By his own statement, he wrote continuously in Gujarati, by hand. When his right hand got tired, he switched the pen to the left hand. And he kept writing day and night. It's a very strange book to read when you know how it was written, in this manner. And when it was finished, he felt, I didn't want to change a word. He didn't change a word even in the English translation, which he himself did a little later. Nor did he change a word after so much criticism of the book had accumulated over the coming decades, including from his closest followers like Pandit Nehru. Hind Swaraj, it requires some way for us to make sense of it. And the only way I have been able to condone its strange experience as a reader is from an Edinburgh-based British psychologist, Liam Hudson, who wrote a book called Human Beings, a apart from several other books that were very famous until a few years ago when books were still read in teacher training courses. Liam Hudson writes in his Human Beings about how Rilke composed his sonnet to Orpheus over a period during which he felt as if this was the only thing that he could do in life, to write that poetry, which to this day is regarded as one of the highest ranking German poetry. He didn't revise it. Every word is written as if it came to him. Liam Hudson says that this peculiarity of sonnets to Orpheus cannot be explained because experiences of that kind they defy our understanding of how good writing happens, even good writing of poetry. So Liam Hudson invokes theories which are no more particularly popular, and Hudson died only a short while ago. Even in his time, in his mature career, they had begun to be unpopular. And psychology as a discipline had already been fully divided into various schools. Liam Hudson was a bold professor in the sense that he mixed various schools of thought in order to explain phenomena. And about this he says, it seems as if the unconscious was tearing through the conscious mind of Rilke. Not that pent-up emotions were coming through, but something else which was part of his unconscious was now coming forth and knew no constraints of any kind. Till it was finished, he kept on writing that work called Sonnets to Orpheus. Hind Swaraj is something similar if you see its process of writing and then come back to it to see how bizarre the whole thesis is. It's not just a thesis about how India should achieve freedom or home rule, etc. That's what the title superficially might suggest. But as you get through the entire book and revisit it, especially when you go back to those episodes where he explains what is violence and is there an alternative to violence, in those portions you realize that he is talking about something quite different from India's freedom. He's talking about a free citizen who doesn't need a state to make him feel secure. He is offering us an entirely different way of looking at the world which we consider the epitome of progress. He first dismisses that world and then comes up with this theory. And the crowning chapters, brief chapters so they are of course chapters on brute force and passive resistance. Gandhi's Hind Swaraj, yes, does read at places like a manifesto. But at the same time, it's also a doctrine which tells us so much more about how to think about Gandhi once we have liberated him from his context, from his historical context. Most of us now like to think that in order to understand a piece of literature or a political tract, the best way is to contextualize it. The plea I'm making is to decontextualize Gandhi and his Hind Swaraj, written in 1909. It's time for us to begin to look at both Gandhi and this very peculiar book of his outside history, as if we can shed the long narrative of history that wraps Gandhi from us, from the time when he was young to the time he was assassinated. We are fully encased in that history, and especially the history of his final years, which remind us that if Gandhi's satyagraha or his struggle for truth was so strong, so real that it shook the British Empire, then perhaps for India it didn't mean that. because India got partitioned, something that he had not wanted. He died thinking that his mission had failed. Gandhi, the human, who is born and who dies, isn't any more interesting. And the debate whether he is still relevant or not is also quite uninteresting. Because when you see Gandhi as fiction, you begin to notice that what he's talking about, these two values, truth and non-violence, are not merely a kind of a ethical, behavioral framework for a civilized society. The man is talking about something else. He's reminding us that truth has never been upheld without a struggle at any point in human history. No matter what the circumstances of that time were, from the most ancient to the present, truth has always demanded a difficult struggle. And that struggle is difficult for human beings because of the fear of being stopped. And that's the reason why the Gandhian explanation, Gandhi's explanation of truth, includes the importance of non-violence. Because violence is always a threat and it causes fear. How will that fear spare us if we were to pursue truth on any matter of any significance in our times, in our countries, in the world? How shall we pursue that idea if the very thought of pursuing the truth of any matter, and there are so many matters around that immediately make us feel threatened. Fear comes in the moment you think about intervening on behalf of truth. Even with a grand collective around you, thousands of people to walk with you, even then, in the most liberal of the liberal democracies of the world today, you are thinking about the next step. Even in the safe confines of your room where you send your messages on social media, you hear about stories of people who had to suffer because of the message they sent. How shall we? Where shall we live without fear? It seems from Gandhi's exposition, his life, his own works, speeches and all, if you put them all together, you feel the only place where human beings can be completely secure will be under the safe custody of God. This is not a matter of rational choice, whether you want to be a believer or a non-believer. And it's not a matter of choosing which religion will give you access to God. It's something beyond all this. The idea that only God can provide you with that security that will let you remain committed to truth. It's a Wittgensteinian idea that there is no possibility of living without fear unless one has that faith. In Gandhi's life, this is expressed numerous times. In trivial moments, you can say, when he's looking after his son and doesn't want any medicine to be served despite his high fever. Two more momentous times when he is completely defenseless, his body is almost naked, and he is inviting trouble every moment. The absence of fear being the primary condition for non